The University of Central Florida is creating a social justice graduate certificate. We have a Huffington Post correspondent saying that the Capitol riots was 1,000 times worse than 9/11, and an Oregon school board may require classrooms to fly the BLM and pride flags. And I have a lot to say about that. Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. Before we get into our lead story today, please take a moment right now to hit that like button. It really does help the YouTube algorithm push my video out there to viewers who have not seen my content or my channel. And if you want to support a new conservative talk show like the Bald Brad Show, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It is for free. You don't have to pay for anything, but also hit the bell notification button so you're notified whenever we go live, which is every Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And with that being said, our lead story of the day comes from our friends over at the Daily Wire. If you're not already a member, please go over and become a subscriber today. It is written by Christy Clark, and she titles it, University of Central Florida Creates Social Justice Graduate Certificate. What a money grab. And the funny thing is there's going to be leftists that are going to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for a degree that you're not going to get a job in. That's the great thing about this. And the leftists aren't even seeing it. But let's go ahead and see what this graduate certificate program entails. It says the University of Central Florida created a graduate certificate program and a communications track focused on social justice. According to the school's website, students can receive a graduate certificate from the College of Community Innovation and Education in Social Justice and Public Service. What a title. What a title. Where are you going to get work for that? Right? And we used to say that as accounting majors. Again, my bachelor's is a Bachelor of Science in Accountancy. We were hired by firms a year before we ever graduated college, meaning we signed contracts. We were good to go, and we knew how much we were going to get paid, and we knew if we were going to be able to ultimately make a lot of money or no money at all right away before we were graduated. But you got a lot of people, they're doing these liberal arts degrees, and it's nothing necessarily against the liberal arts degrees, but they're just completely shocked when they graduate college and they just spent $60,000 to $100,000 and they don't have a job coming out of college. And by the way, there's not even a market for it. So this is exactly what's going to happen here for these social justice and public service degrees. I don't know what you do with that other than maybe finding a communications degree or a communications job out there in a market where these leftist firms work. Maybe Disney will pick them up, Apple, Google, Amazon. Maybe they'll have a market for that. But it says the program is aimed at developing leaders who can influence policy to create social justice. Students will study the theoretical background of social justice, explore topics such as human rights, income distribution, and the role of markets. So really, when they say income distribution, they're talking about redistribution of wealth. When they're saying the role of markets, they're talking about socialism because they don't agree with capitalism. They don't agree with the free market. So it's just these nice little tags like income distribution and the role of markets, when in actuality, they're going to talk about redistribution of wealth and socialism. The topics will help students understand the impact of social justice on government and nonprofit sectors in education, health, transportation, and housing policy domains, among others. Students will understand factors that contribute to inequality among various groups. We talk about that all the time. Whenever they're talking about inequality, they're talking about disparities that is out there in the ether. And wherever there's a disparity, guess what there is? Racism. And that's exactly what they're going to be talking about here. So when they talk about students will understand factors that contribute to inequality, really just rephrase that and say students will understand factors that can contribute to disparities and racism. So they're going to look into systemic racism and how it affects ultimately some groups over other groups, which, by the way, systemic racism does not exist. Individualized racism does, but not systemic racism. It goes on to say, with a focus of providing a theoretical background and methods to analyze social justice issues in a public service, the course description reads, examples of classes include equitable educational opportunity and life chances, whatever that means, environmental security, that just means global warming, women and public policy, transgenderism, social inequities in health, that just has to do with racism and disparities once again, and human rights and security. The graduate certificate is designed for students who wish to become city council members, government professors, legislators, political consultants, senators, and other public policy figures. The university also created a track within the School of Communications for social innovation and activism. The track is designed for future authors and journalists who wish to focus more on activism and try to change the social fabric of our country in a negative way, which is why you see things like revisionist history coming into the play, or into play. You see things like critical race theory trying to come back into the classroom, or come into the classroom, not necessarily back. But then you also have the 1619 Project coming in. You have white privilege coming in. You have all these things that you have these leftists that are ultimately writing, these authors, and that's seeping our way into the education system and ultimately producing more of these woke leftists, woke journalists. And now they're creating entire sectors and degrees that's going to focus on this stuff, which is just indoctrinating kids even more. Classes within the communications activism track cost approximately $212 per credit hour for in-state students and $748 per credit hour for out-of-state students. And that's typical. Usually out-of-state students are going to pay more than in-state students. UCF is not the first school to create a social justice degree. According to Campus Reform, who does great work, by the way, the University of Iowa became one of the first schools in 2016 to add a bachelor's program in social justice to its list of degrees. The University of Iowa began by offering first-year seminars on social justice and a Justice for All living learning community where students can live and learn about systemic problems in our society, which again is just talking about systemic racism. It's just a play on words here, you guys. That's all they're doing. They're not going to come out and tell you, oh, this is systemic racism. They're just going to say, learn about systemic problems in our society. The school boards of regents eventually voted in favor of creating an entire degree program. Some universities are painting social justice degrees as African American study departments. And I fully agree with that. If you go into these African American study departments, that's what they look at: disparities, they look at social justice issues, they look on wealth distribution, the impact that ultimately reparations or the lack of reparations have had on communities of color. So this is all the stuff they dive into here. According to the College Fix, St. Louis University axed its undergraduate department for American Studies and replaced it with African American Studies department that was unpopular among students. The university's graduation slideshow listed just one student with a minor in African American Studies in 2020. Huge market for this stuff, guys. A lot of students and a lot of parents want their students to study African American Studies because there's a huge market, tons of jobs out there for this stuff. You're going to be able to pay back that degree just within no time at all. And then they wonder, right? Then they wonder that the people that are making these degrees, and they're allowing students to come in with these degrees, and then these students leave with these degrees in debt, and then they can't pay back their debt, and then they hire a president that wants to ultimately pay off their student loans for them because they can't get a job because they just got a freaking degree in African American Studies. You see how this works? But hey, you know what? At least they learned how to do wealth distribution, which is why they are asking the president of the United States, or they're asking the government to pay off their student loans, because all that is just wealth redistribution, where you and I as a taxpayer have to take our wealth and redistribute it to those that wanted to be idiots and get an American study degree or an African American studies degree and then not have a job coming out of college, and they can't fathom why they're working at McDonald's and they can't even pay off the interest on their student loan. But, you know, that's because they're taking African American studies and not econ, not accounting, not engineering, not mathematics. Maybe, you know, things that can make you an actual prosperous person in society and make a lot of money and ultimately support yourself and others. In a the Facebook post, the American Studies Department chair said that our current majors and minors received an email from Provost Mike Lewis announcing his intention to close our BA major and minor programs. The department chair said, however, that the program had taken it upon itself to institute an emphasis on social justice and diversity. I hope many of you will be interested in supporting this larger fight on behalf of future students and for the sake of maintaining our department footprint as a vibrant interdisciplinary program in which every classroom considers structural inequality, social justice, and diversity in many intersectional senses. So all this is just a leftist, ultimately propaganda machine to indoctrinate our children in order to have these people be going out into our society and pushing leftist ideas, which is socialism, communism, Marxism, things like that. And I'm not kidding, by the way. That is a real thing. And we're already seeing it from the middle school level to the high school level to university system, where teachers are now openly saying, by the way, that socialism is good. Take that as somebody that's in the educational field. It is being said. You can ask your children. They've definitely heard it before. And I've also tested it myself. I've asked various students while they're learning about the isms if they have learned that socialism is good. And almost every single student I've polled says that they never learned that it was bad. Okay. And some of them outright said that they learned that it was good, which is truthfully mind-blowing. You don't have to look very far. You just have to look at Venezuela, where they're starving to death. But we can't look at countries like that because according to Bernie Sanders, it's not Venezuela anymore. Venezuela is not socialism. Cuba wasn't socialism. all these places were not socialist at one point. But, we just have to look at like Denmark, Norway, all these other places. I can't even do it today because my voice is going to cut out because I'm about to lose my voice. Mind you, I speak all day, folks, so please bear with me. Really bear with me today. Now, our next news story comes from our friends over at Blaze Media. It is written by the man, the myth, the legend. Yes, folks, you said it correctly. My man, Phil Shiver, and he titles it, HuffPo's White House Correspondent, Capitol Riot was 1,000% worse than 9/11. Phil starts off by saying the worst damnable take to date with regard to the January 6th Capitol riot now belongs, to Huffington Post senior White House correspondent SV Date. In a series of Twitter posts on Tuesday, Date claimed that the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks against the United States, which were carried out by foreign Islamic extremists, killed nearly 3,000 Americans, injured 25,000 more, shut the stock market down for a week, and set off a decades-long war in the Middle East, where nothing in comparison to the extremism of the January 6th riot took place at the Capitol. What a shocking statement to make, or at least a comparison to make. It's not even comparable. You're going to take the Capitol 6th riot and ultimately equate that to with what happened at 9/11. This is how far our leftist journalism has gone. This is how far the mass media have gone to manipulate, to ultimately exaggerate history, to ultimately create new history, create a revisionist history out there, and ultimately twist the American minds into them thinking that ultimately the Capitol riots was worse than 9/11. There's people out there just from the Huffington Post. They have full belief in what the Huffington Post says, that they're going to believe now. You're going to have American citizens now roaming the streets thinking that the Capitol riots was worse than 9/11. And the media knows that, which is why they say crazy crap like that on air, because now they twisted the minds. And then later on, they'll do a correction and an apology. But at that point, damage is done. At that point, you've already changed the minds of Americans. And that's how certain things get drawn out. That's how certain things will ultimately divide our country even further, by making statements like this. The Liberal reporter was responding to a tweet thread by conservative commentator York on Tuesday when he launched into an argument that eventually resulted in him shockingly claiming that the Capitol riots was 1,000% worse than 9/11. After York, the fellow commentator George Will's desire to see January 6th burned into the American mind as firmly as 9/11 because it was that scale of a shock to the system, Date jumped in to defend Will. It's quoted here saying, Trump apology corpse in full apology mode. He charged before, arguing that 9/11 terrorists and Osama bin Laden never threatened the heart of the American experiment, but the 1/6 terrorists and Donald Trump absolutely did exactly that. Unbelievable. Basically, they're saying that those that rushed at Capitol riots, which no conservative or Republican agrees with that doing, they all disavow it. They all, including myself, think it was batshit crazy and should have never been done. Those people are not conservative. Those people are not Trump supporters, even though they say they are, because they don't support the conservative idea. They don't support the Republican ideas. But you're going to equate those people and basically say that they're worse than Islamic extremists and worse than Osama bin Laden, that ultimately have blown people up, killed thousands upon thousands of people. You're going to equate them to being lesser than ultimately the people at the Capitol 6th riots? Are you out of your mind? Oh, these people get paid just to say crazy crap like that. Can you imagine if I got paid thousands upon thousands of dollars to say crazy crap like that? By the way, I would never, because I don't believe in this crazy stuff that they're promoting here. But they're going to be American citizens, again, that hear this stuff, read this stuff, and ultimately believe this stuff. This attempt to whitewash what happened that day is shameful, Date continued, noting that while September 11th was an act of war, January 6th was an attempt to end our democracy carried out by U.S. citizens, including then President Donald Trump. What a silly statement. If you saw footage inside the Capitol, there was Congress in there just going around with their daily business. They didn't even think anything of it. Somebody asked for like a cup of coffee. They were fine. Of course, you had AOC that was supposedly hiding behind the door, and the person in there was like, what are you doing? Just get up. Just everything's going to be fine. So them just saying it's the end of our democracy is absolutely silly. Just really, really silly stuff. But hey, you know what? More power to them for being paid to say crazy crap and not even have to second guess their own thoughts. Even after one commentator smartly pointed out that one of the hijacked planes on September 11th was bound for the Capitol, Date refused to back off his stance. Of course. United 93 was intended to crash into the Capitol. You think January 6th was worse than that? The commentator asked, to which Date responded, 1,000% worse. And that's where our leftist media have gone. They're going to double down on crap like this because they genuinely believe it. And these are the people that ultimately would take that social justice class at the University of Central Florida. These are the people that get their ideas, not just starting from high school, but ultimately are indoctrinated in the ultimately the university system, the UC system, college, the university system, the academia, whatever the heck you want to call it. They're being indoctrinated, not just through mass media, but ultimately through these educators, these leftist professors that are at these colleges, teaching them about ultimately critical race theory, 1619 Project, that America is systemically racist, that America is systemically evil, that we need to tear it down from the bottom to the top, top to bottom, that every Trump supporter is racist, anybody that's wearing a red hat is racist, anybody that's white is racist. You know, everything is racist in America, and it's ultimately worse than Islamic extremists. And that's what they believe in. Those are the radical ideas of mass media. Those are the radical ideas of this Huffington Post correspondent, and you see it right there within that person's own words. I'm not even going to bother reading the rest. There isn't much left here. But there you have it. Huffington Post, White House correspondent. Capitol riot was 1,000% worse than 9/11. Just crazy crap. Now, there's another story here that I didn't bring up on the intro, but we have TV stars Chip and Joanna Gaines donate to campaign against critical race theory in schools. I wanted to bring something positive into the mix today. I actually love Chip and Joanna Gaines. I love their show. If you don't recall who they are, they're the ones that run Magnolia. They have their own business. I believe they're booked out of Waco, Texas, and they do great work. And hey, you know what? They're doing great work by donating to a campaign that ultimately is going against critical race theory. It says here, Chip and Joanna Gaines of HGTV Fixer Upper, that was the name of the show, but I believe their company is Magnolia, fame, donated $1,000 on Wednesday to Shannon Brown's campaign, and forgive me, I'm probably mispronouncing that last name, for the Grapevine Colleyville Independent School District School Board, a candidate who is against critical race theory, the Dallas Morning News reported. Critical race theory is the notion that traditional liberal approaches to dealing with racial inequities need to be reconsidered because laws favor white supremacy. Braun, who is Chip Gaines' sister, is running in the June 5th runoff election against incumbent trustee Mindy McClure. That is really Irish, I believe. I think it's Irish. Forgive me if I'm wrong, folks. On her platform, which focuses on giving our kids the education they deserve, Braun is a proponent of fighting critical race theory, which she called the single most divisive threat in education. And I would have to agree with that, is that critical race theory is only going to further indoctrinate our children, and that's only going to further separate the country rather than bring the country together. And by the way, it's a theory. It's based on a false premise. It's based on a theory. You wouldn't call something a theory if it's been proven true. It would no longer be a theory at that point. It would transform, I believe, into a law. Meaning, right, you have like the law of physics, you have the law of aerodynamics, you have something that's provable time and time again. On a theory, it's just something out there that's basically an opinion. Oh, well, I think this was the cause and ultimately the effect of something. So it's not even based on truth. It's just based on a bogus idea here that America is systemically racist, and wherever you have inequities and inequalities, there's ultimately disparities, and then ultimately leads to racism. And that's what they're trying to push within our school system here, which is just going to create a bunch of leftist children out there thinking that their country is ultimately evil and racist, and they're going to grow up hating our country and wanting to tear it down from the inside out. I will vote down anything and everything that further promotes critical race theory in our school district and actively work to remove all critical race theory, Braun says in a video posted on her campaign Facebook page. Oddly, the district she is running for is not teaching critical race theory and does not have an interest in doing so, so they say. And it's not always going to be labeled critical race theory. They have different labels for this type of education that's entering into the education system. So you have to be on the lookout when you see equity, or you see equality, or you see anything about disparities, or yes, African American studies, but anything that kind of you can tell is talking a little bit about leftist ideology just in the name alone. I can't think of stuff off the top of my head, but there are some localities and local schools here that are trying to push critical race theory under a different label, under a different brand. So just be on the lookout for that type of stuff in your locality or in your local school districts. The GCISD released a statement clarifying the confusion. The Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or TEKS, are state standards for what schools should know and be able to do in each grade level. These are adopted by the State Board of Education and are then shared with school districts across the state to determine curriculum to best meet these standards. As we encourage our students to take ownership of their learning, they often have choice in how they approach an assignment or topic they research and study, as long as they can demonstrate mastery of the text. This does not mean, however, that critical race theory is part of the curriculum, the statement confirmed. Well, it doesn't mean that it's not part of the curriculum, and it doesn't mean that it is part of the curriculum. Basically, what you're saying is there's kind of a gray area where it's almost up to the teacher to bring in critical race theory and maybe have students research it, talk about it, have maybe a Socratic seminar on it. So it's not saying that it isn't. They're basically saying, look, it's not part of the standards, but we're also saying that it is and is not part of the curriculum. We're kind of leaving it up in a gray area. So it's a way to kind of maneuver around it. And it's good for Chip and Joanna Gaines to maybe, I would assume, know that and know that there's a gray area that's being said here by the school board or by the school district and donating $1,000 to this campaign so ultimately they can overcome this critical race theory that's being had. So I'm really happy for them. Finally, we get some TV stars thrown into the mix here, doing things that are good for our children and good for our school districts. And lastly, we have another news story written here by Chrissy Clark. She is almost my next Phil Shiver. She does great work. She's a very smart girl, and her writing is absolutely phenomenal. It's titled, Oregon School Board May Require Classrooms to Fly BLM and Pride Flags. And I have a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge on this. I can't go too far into detail on what I will tell you later, but this is ultimately possibly going to happen also in the Catholic school system. An Oregon school board updated a policy to mandate that each classroom in the school district display a Black Lives Matter and progressive flag or poster. On May 6th, the Gresham Barlow School Board in Gresham, Oregon, updated the district's flag displays and salutes policy to reflect the progressive values of the board. The proposal would require the school board to provide an American flag, Pride flag, and BLM flag for each classroom. And so one thing you have to realize is that Oregon, California, these coastal areas are some of the most leftist places in the Union in the United States. And so it's not surprising to see this kind of move coming from a leftist area. And so I would expect this probably to actually go through here where you'll see all three flags within the classroom and kind of a little bit of behind the scenes. And I'm not going to tell you how I know this, but there is talks, or I've at least heard rumors of students wanting pride flags to be placed inside classrooms within a private Catholic school, which is truthfully mind-blowing because it's a religious institution, folks, that doesn't believe. They think that's a sin. It's like putting a gay pride flag up in a Christian school. You probably shouldn't do that. You're ultimately promoting sin, which goes against your belief, which goes against the Bible that you read. So again, I'm not going to say how I know that. There's just rumors going out there. I don't think it's actually going to happen. I think that's too ludicrous. I think parents would revolt on mass levels if they were to see gay pride flags inside religious institutions. But seeing that here on the Oregon side of things, that does not surprise me. And so be on the lookout, folks. If you're on the West Coast, if you're in New York, if you're in Oregon, if you're in Seattle, if you're in LA, if you're anywhere in California, if you're anywhere in Washington, look for these types of things, because if it's going to be here, you're darn right that there's other school boards that are talking about placing these flags inside their schools as well. You're just not hearing about it. The district shall obtain and display a U.S. flag, a progressive pride flag or poster, and a Black Lives Matter flag or poster of an appropriate size for each classroom. Stowers, one of the more progressive school board members, insisted the board require all three flags to be the same size, because you need to have equality of size, folks. You see that? So that there's no disparities, so that there's no one being bigger than the other, one being more dominant than the other. Because if you do that, you might be racist, or you might be being disrespectful, or you might not be caring or loving towards one group over the other. So you have to be careful, make sure they're all of equal size. So get out your rulers, folks, and make sure that you check this stuff so that you know that pride is equal to Black Lives Matter, and those two are all equal to the American flag. Stowers also demanded that any tribal government also be allowed to put a flag in each classroom upon request. The school board agreed that flying a flag at a local Oregon school district was not at the top of most tribes' to-do lists, but insisted on adding the provision anyway. Upon request for a sovereign tribal government, a flag representing the sovereign tribal government must be displayed on, near, or within a school building during school hours. The policy reads, the location of the flag will be determined by the district in consultation with the requesting sovereign tribal government. The board received a report from Oregon School Board Association stating that there may be a resistance and upset parents if the board forces teachers to fly the flags in each classroom. Another board member, Chris Howett, cited the report and questioned whether it was worth it to force the flags on all teachers. She was told by a colleague that she was pushing white supremacy. I said it. I said it would come up. Mind you, I was more joking about just ultimately the size of the flags, but you'd be racist, right? There's a disparity. There's an inequality. You even questioning if something like this should be pushed in the flag in the classrooms, forcing teachers to put up a gay pride flag or BLM flag in their classroom. I shouldn't be forced to put something in my classroom that I ultimately don't agree with. It's my classroom. It's my environment. And by the way, the left always push about having a safe, promoting a unified, positive classroom environment, but there might be students in there that are going to be triggered by a BLM flag or by a pride flag. So why have it in there in the first place? You always talk about the American flag triggering people, or there was a story I covered with the history teacher posting a Nazi flag in their room for a little while, taking it down and then posting it back up as soon as being triggered. So why is it okay for you to be triggered on one flag and forcing a teacher to take it down, which again, I don't agree with Nazis, but you're going to force teachers to put a gay pride flag up, or you're going to force them to put a Black Lives Matter flag up. But when a teacher wants to put other flags up that you disagree with, it's not okay. And that's the whole identity of the left. The left want to have power, and it's so funny because they talk about white supremacy and they talk power on that level, but they don't talk about the power that they're constantly pushing on the American citizen, upon the individual, on forcing them to do things that they don't want to do. And a prime example I talked about in the past is you had an LGBTQ gay couple forcing a baker to force them to bake them a cake for their wedding. The baker's like, look, no, that goes against my religion. I'm not going to do that. You can go find somebody else to bake you a cake. They ultimately sued the guy. There's a big uproar over it. But that's ultimately what the left wants. The left wants to have power over the individual, just as they want with socialism, just as they want with Marxism through Black Lives Matter, just as they want through communism in various parts of the world. They want to bring this stuff and ultimately destroy this great country that we have, and they're starting it through the education system. They're doing it through mass media, and you're seeing the indoctrination going from our classrooms on a public school level and sometimes private school level to the universities and creating social justice graduate degree certificates here, and then ultimately promulgating critical race theory, ultimately promulgating the 1619 Project, ultimately promulgating that America is a racist, systemically racist country where ultimately you have cops out there that are hunting black men into the streets and just killing them at rates up to 10,000 and above, which isn't true. And so there's a lot of things that can rattle off here, but you're seeing that ultimately these leftist ideas, these leftist agendas are going to destroy this country, not in a span of a year, not in a span of 10 years or even 50 years, but 100 plus years. You're going to see this country crumble, and ultimately you're not going to have all these great freedoms and liberties that we have today, because ultimately even the ones that we had in the past are slowly being stripped away today. Even the ones we had in the past don't even exist today, or they've been limited or infringed upon. But that is the evils of the left, which is why we need to make sure that we support channels like Ben Shapiro, The Daily Wire, Blaze Media, Steven Crowder. I ask you to support my channel so we can get conservative thought out there and show students, young men and young women, that it's not about collective. It's not about tribalism. It's about you as an individual listening to The Bald Brad Show, Ben Shapiro Show, Steven Crowder Show, reading the Huffington Post, reading and listening to CNN, and then you as the viewer, you deciding what is right and what is wrong. Don't allow me, don't allow Huffington Post, don't allow CNN to ultimately dictate your own viewpoint. You listen to people and you decide which argument is better, which one is right and which one is wrong. And that might require a little bit more reading. That might require a little bit more research. That might require you to take a little bit more time out of your day to listen to more podcasts or more shows. But folks, if you enjoy the Bald Brad Show and you think that you agree with my ideas and you think that other people should listen to it as well, then again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really does help support the channel. But folks, that is all the news I have for you today. I hope all of you are having a lovely week. Thank you so much for always supporting me. Thank you for always commenting down in the comment section. I love your comments. They always crack me up. Some of you got some really witty stuff down there. I always love talking to all of you, and I hope all of you again are doing very well, and I'll see you tomorrow here on The Bald Brad Show.